Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 12 on Warfare Through Time. And this video, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at still early modern period 1500 to 1700, and we are looking in particular at one of the key battles, 1645, the English Civil War, the Battle of Naseby. Now, the Battle of Naseby was a key turning point in the English Civil War, and the reason for that links to the previous video where I was talking about the new model army. So think back to the previous video, go back and have another look at it and see, hopefully in this video, how the new model army was vitally important for Parliament winning the Battle of Naseby in the English Civil War. It changed the course of the war. So let's have a little look. Ladies and gentlemen, some decisions amaze me. They were totally crazy at the Battle of Naseby. What decisions went on during that battle and how did they influence the battle? Well, hopefully this video will try to explain that to you. It was a turning point. Now let's start. We've got the Royalist army, King Charles, fighting Parliament's army. Straight away we can analyse and have a look at the size of the armies. Now we've got to remember it's estimated only, and there are various estimates. Some people say the King Charles, had about 5,000 cavalry, 4,000 infantry, making a total of 9,000. At the same time, they say Parliament's army, 6,500 cavalry, 6,500 infantry, making a total of 13,000. So some historians say, therefore, that the Parliament's army was about 4,000 larger. Other estimates, slightly different. They say the King, round about 6,700 cavalry, 5,800 infantry, making a total of 12,500. Parliament, 8,500 cavalry, 8,500 infantry, making a total of 17,000. It doesn't really matter. The point is, Parliament's army was definitely larger than the King's. We'll come back to that later in the video. What about the position of the armies, ladies and gentlemen? Well, here we have one of my simple drawings. Here at the top, in blue, we have King Charles's army. In the middle, the infantry, musketeers and pikemen, and on the flanks, cavalry. Down here we have Parliament's army. Right at the very back, the artillery train, the baggage train. That's going to be very important for later. In the middle, we have the new model army infantry, and on both flanks, the new model army cavalry. So they are matched like that. Notice, over here, Parliament's army is protected by a hedge on the west. Remember our previous video? Thomas Fairfax, one of these new leaders of the new model army, he has placed his men below the ridge, out of sight of the King's army. That was quite a clever move because at the time the morale of his men was quite low and he didn't want them to see the enemy for a long period of time before the battle. So Parliament's army, particularly Fairfax, is in a reasonably strong position. Before the battle though, Oliver Cromwell, another of these new leaders, Oliver Cromwell persuades Fairfax. He says, look, if you advance it will slightly weaken your position, but it will encourage the Royalist army to attack us. And that's what Parliament wanted. They wanted the battle. Now I mentioned here, right at the very back, the artillery train. Artillery, cannons, played only a very small part in the Battle of Naseby, ladies and gentlemen. Parliament allegedly fired about 5 volleys, 5 shells, most of which went over the top of the King's infantry. The King's artillery was actually too slow to get into position, so they didn't really fire any. So artillery, therefore, is not really very important in the result of the Battle of Naseby. So, we've had a look at the size of the armies, we've had a look at their position, we've had a look at how the infantry and cavalry are laid out. What actually happened when the battle commenced? Well, as you can see from the arrows, both sides advance. I'm going to start here on this side because the king's cavalry advanced and did very, very well against the new model army cavalry. The king's cavalry led by Prince Rupert, a nephew of King Charles. Notice again, a relative, a rich relative in charge of the part of the army. Continuity, we've seen that before. Prince Rupert's cavalry attacks and pushes back many of the new model army cavalry. Maybe as many as 1,000 retreat from the battlefield. Now, here is one of those key decisions, one of those crazy mistakes which influenced the Battle of Naseby. Prince Rupert lost control of his cavalry, and instead of them regrouping and then maybe attacking the infantry, which would have helped the king possibly to win, instead Prince Rupert's cavalry chases off the battlefield, looking for plunder, for rewards down here amongst the baggage train. They are gone for over 1 hour. That was a key decision and also a key mistake. So that's the first key point in the battle. What's going on in the middle? Well, both infantries attack. Both fire their muskets. Okay? But they probably use Swedish salvo. Remember, I talked about in previous videos either the Dutch square or the Swedish salvo, the musketeers firing at each other. When they get too close to actually fire their muskets, they indulge in hand-to-hand fighting, either using the butt of their musket to hit each other with, and then the pikemen come in. If you remember a tactic called push-off pike, they put their pikes in the air and basically pushed each other. The king's infantry were very experienced, and they begin to gain the upper hand. So things are going well for the king at first. Prince Rupert has defeated the cavalry, and now the king's infantry break through the new model army first line of defence. But, there's always a but, ladies and gentlemen. Thomas Fairfax sees what's happening and he goes in and encourages his men, and the second line of defence in the new model army stands firm. They do not run, they hold their position. So although the king's infantry did well at the start, they are then held up by the second line of infantry, by the new model army. Well trained, well disciplined, they did not run. What's happening over here on the other side? Well, this side we see the new model army's best cavalry, led by Oliver Cromwell. His men were perfectly well selected. They were the best men. They had the best weapons. They were very well trained. They were very well disciplined. They won the nickname the Ironsides. Well, when Cromwell's cavalry attack, they break through and they chase this part of the king's cavalry off the field. Remember over here, Prince Rupert, his men did exactly the same. But then Prince Rupert lost control and his men tried to get plunder from the baggage train. Well, here's a difference. Cromwell retains control of his cavalry. He does not allow his men to charge off the field. Instead, he gets them to regroup and then they attack the king's infantry from the side. This was another key part of the battle. So, what happens then? Thomas Fairfax again. These new leaders, ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Fairfax says, right, this is a key moment in the battle. We have got a chance here to organise and win the battle. So what does he do? He gets his infantry. He gets Cromwell's cavalry. He gets some dragoons, if you remember, light cavalry, who could fight on foot, led by a man called Colonel Oakey. Great name. And he gets them all to attack the King's reserve, the King's infantry here, who are under pressure. He gets them to attack in a concerted, coordinated way. They are all following orders. The cavalry, the dragoons, the infantry, all fighting together. It's not a case of Colonel Oakey and the Okey Cokey. We put one soldier in, one soldier out. No, it's not like that. They are all in together. I suppose you could say it was a case of everyone and everything going okie dokie. Sorry, terrible joke, I apologise. So, here we have the key part of the battle. Prince Rupert finally gets his men together from back here. They come back to the battlefield. They've been gone over an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, it was too late, because the key battle is going on here. We've got the infantry, the King's reserve, and a few of Rupert's cavalry. But they are no match for Parliament's infantry, led by Thomas Fairfax, the cavalry, and Cromwell's cavalry, the Ironsides, and Colonel Oakey's dragoons. Put them all together, and after a brief fight by the Royalists, they then either run away or they are captured. The Battle of Naseby lasted about 3 hours. In the end, it was a huge victory for Parliament. Most of the Royal Infantry was captured, about 4,500. Royal supplies of gunpowder and firearms, weapons were captured. Many of the cavalry rode away, but then Cromwell allows his men to leave the battlefield and chase them down and run them down and actually kill them on the way to Leicester. Hundreds were killed. So the king has lost most of his infantry and he's lost most of his cavalry. The king's army has been pretty much destroyed. This was the turning point in the Battle of Naseby, affecting the English Civil War. Now let's have a little think. Why? Why was the Battle of Naseby such a big victory for Parliament? Why did they win? What reasons, what factors could you come up with? Any ideas? Well, think right back to the start of the video. The Royalist army was outnumbered. Parliament had more men. That's one factor. Despite that, King Charles was very confident, maybe overconfident that his men would win. Second factor. Next thing, key mistakes. Prince Rupert's mistake, not controlling his cavalry and allowing them to leave the battlefield. Compare that to the control of Cromwell. He's got proper control over his cavalry. In the centre, the new model army, their second line of infantry, did not crack. It held. And that gave time for Cromwell to defeat his cavalry and then swoop in and attack from the flank. In the video, I've mentioned a couple of people. Well, we've got Prince Rupert, maybe making terrible mistakes. We've got Thomas Fairfax and Oliver Cromwell, both doing very, very well. Fairfax inspired his men, particularly at key points in the battle, in the centre there, when the second line of infantry held. Then he counterattacked towards the end, but he's organised it. He's got Cromwell's cavalry, Oakey's dragoons and his own infantry, all piling in against the King's reserve at the end. Big ticks for Thomas Fairfax. Well done. You played your hand well. What about Cromwell? Well, he arrives the night before the battle to give the new model army a big boost to increase their morale. He trained his men very, very well. The Ironside, he'd got the best men, not the richest men. Remember that quote from a previous video. Give me a russet-coated gentleman, someone who's a plain man but good at his job. Before the battle started, he advised Fairfax to slightly weaken his position, to entice, to bring the royalist army in. And then, right at the end of the battle, when he beats the cavalry, he keeps control of his own men, attacks the infantry, and then, finally, when the king's men are running away, then he sends his cavalry to destroy them as they retreated away from the battle. Leadership, control of cavalry, great decision making. Well done, Oliver Cromwell, at the Battle of Naseby. So there we see the Battle of Naseby. A key battle. Could they ask us a GCSE question? Well, of course they could. So it gives me a chance to wear my silly hat. Now then, a nice, simple, straightforward 4-mark question. What about this? Explain one way the role of mounted soldiers in the Battle of Falkirk and the Battle of Naseby was the same. Similarity between the Battle of Falkirk and the Battle of Naseby. In other words, we are looking for continuity. 4-mark question, 5 minutes. Well, first of all, we have to identify the similarity. What was the same? Battle of Falkirk cavalry? Battle of Naseby cavalry. What was the same? Well, there's quite a few, but you only need to give one way. So I'm just going to choose one. Here it is. One thing that was the same in both battles was the cavalry was vital. The cavalry was very important for destroying the enemy foot soldiers, the enemy infantry. Full stop. That's my similarity. But now I've got to prove it. Now I've got to show some evidence or some examples. In the Battle of Falkirk, once the longbows had weakened the Scottish schiltrons, the English cavalry swept in and destroyed the Scottish infantry, helped by the longbowmen. Full stop. At the Battle of Naseby, Cromwell's cavalry swept in and destroyed King Charles's infantry once the second line of New Model Army infantry had held their line. So in other words, in both battles, the cavalry helped to destroy the infantry, but they got help. At Falkirk, it was the longbowmen. At Naseby, it was the musketeers and the pikemen. Full stop. You've shown a similarity and you've explained and given examples from both battles. 5 minutes, 4 out of 4. You're ready for your next question. And talking of being ready for the next thing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've now finished the second part of the course. Early modern warfare, 1500 to 1700. Tick. Done. It's time to move on to the third section. What we're going to call the industrial period. 1700 to 1900. What was warfare like in that particular period? What stayed the same and what changed? Well, we've got a whole series of videos next, coming soon, to explain that. As ever, I hope it's been useful. The Battle of Naseby. Very, very interesting battle and very important. All the best now. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.